love this one. Okay. Oh, sis, so how are you doing today? How's your research administrative day going?
I'm tired.
God, Allie and I were just talking about how tired we are. And we were talking about how she has a tendency to like when she's working, like she will just put 100% of her energy, effort, and like I'm like that too.
Yep.
So are you. Like we're just so hardcore, you know, in terms of like how much intensity we put into things. So it's hard not to get tired.
Yeah.
So listen, we had all kinds of things planned to talk about today. And so I'm literally going to do this on live with my sister and be like, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to talk about something different. And I'll tell you why.
All right.
Because
awesome.
I didn't expect to get an email like immediately after our first episode, which is, I'm just going to say, I kind of feel like we've arrived, that we got
nice.
our first. Katie asked, could you, she said that she was listening to the podcast and she said you touched upon how you got into research administration. And she's like, it sounded like such an interesting story. She's like, I don't even know. She's like, this job is interesting and I love it and it's kind of cool. She's like, but I want to know, how did you fall into it? So I was like, oh my God, why don't we do a video where we talk about how we got into research administration? Because that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, like, all right, so I'm going to let you...
Has their origin story, you know?
I know, right?
Yeah. And actually, this
All
is so timely because so today my LinkedIn post, so this is hilarious. My LinkedIn post today is actually about finding your why and Simon Sinek and like all that stuff. So it's actually very timely. So, I mean, obviously you know this story, but I'll share it with the world.
Well, if you didn't, if you talked only about what I know, Saira, then this podcast would be very short. We wouldn't really be saying anything at all.
This is true. This is so true. So, you know, it's funny to talk about this with you because it's like our stories are so similar because like obviously we're siblings, so we have the same life story. But it was, how old were we? I think I was 24.
You know what? I'm actually going to tell you. Okay, I'm going to take it. I'm going to actually start the story because it starts, I think, before you think it starts, and then you're going to pick up on it, okay?
Okay.
So Saira and I fell into research administration sort of together. I was a bouncer at the Paradise, and I had a couple of temp jobs, and I think Saira was working... This is when we were really young. So like we're in our early 20s right now and we're working as temps for Randstad. Yes. And I ended up getting a job at neurosurgery at a temp job at Brigham and Women's working in the neurosurgery department, like downstairs in the basement. And I was working on the grants and the sundry funds that were managed in neurosurgery. There was a need for... And it wasn't like, honestly, it was nothing serious because at this point I'm 22, I'm off, I'm doing 100 different types of jobs and things like that. And then they had a need for a second person and Saira was looking for something. And so Mark Miller, who was my boss, Mark, I know, he was our mentor. Oh my God, he believed in us when we were just kids.
Yeah.
He hired Saira. And so now Saira and I were managing research administration, for neurosurgery. And Saira, actually, you did a lot of the CPT coding and things like that at the time too, right?
Yes. But actually, your story is a little flawed. Your memory is a little fuzzy here because actually what happened, I remember being interviewed by Gail before Mark was even hired. And I got hired to do temp work. And I remember there were stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of paper. Like everywhere there was just stacks of paper. And I was supposed to come in and help organize things. And then Mark actually got hired as the administrative director after we were both hired, and then we just ended up hitting it off and having a great, he was like, you guys have so much potential. And I think what was so great about Mark is that he was the type of person who just, if you showed up and you worked hard, he was going to reward you by, number one, recognizing that you were working hard, but number two, like giving you more responsibility. And I loved that. I constantly felt like someone had faith in me and someone had faith in you, and we were rewarded for our work, not just by getting more responsibility, but also eventually like my first real full-time job. Remember he created those two jobs?
Oh my God, I remember.
Yes.
And as you're talking about it, what I'm thinking is because when we were younger, so like had just moved to the States, it had only been a few years. So we were, now we've lived here for 20 something years. It's a different story, but we'd only lived here for a little while. We were young, we were women, and we had very little experience, but a lot of skills. And I feel like, chronically ill to boot. And I gotta say, when I think about inclusion and belonging, Mark was doing this back in, because I remember being so surprised at how much effort and he was putting into, like, people just hadn't done that for me before in America. Like, it was a completely different space. And so I feel like he really led the charge in that. Like, he really taught me about the kind of leader that I wanted to be.
It's so true. He was ahead of his time.
Oh, he was so great. So, okay. So now we're doing that. And then our mom got sick. And so now so I'm going to let you take over because I saw your post today. So go ahead. Take it over, sister.
So our mom, Minessa, our mom was awesome, but she was chronically ill. And, at the time growing up in Pakistan, and she was from America, lived in Pakistan, there was no name for what she had. People didn't really know what fibromyalgia was. People didn't know what chronic illness was. So, she struggled with illness her whole life. So when she said, hey, I'm not feeling well and, I need to come to the States and see a doctor, Minessa and I didn't really think anything of it because she'd kind of been sick our whole life. And then she shows up, we find out that she's terminally ill. And from the diagnosis to her death, it was like 3 months. I mean, it was just so fast.
It was so fast. I actually, it was, she came, she saw the doctors and suddenly she was gone. And you were like, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
what just happened?
Yeah, what just happened? It felt so... I was so ill prepared. And and here's the thing that people don't tell you, right? Even though it's coming, right? The train is coming. The doctors told us that mom was terminal. It was still a shock. Like,
right, for sure.
The day it happened, I remember standing there just being like, wait, what? How did this just happen? So I think like a lot of people do, which I talked about in my post today, you have these emotional earthquakes. I was, completely devastated and broken. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start over. I'm going to leave my job. At that time, Mark had left the Brigham. And, I just was looking for something. I just needed something different. I needed something to change so that I would feel like I was moving forward. And a friend of mine at the time, Dave John.
I was going to say, was it Dave something? I knew it was Dave something. Dave John.
He says to me, he goes, have you ever thought about research administration? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What? Having
already done it, by the way, just right. FYI, you're like, what?
And I was like, what is that? And so then he kind of, explains to me, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I do. We've done that. Like I have some experience. He's like, with your skills what you've been doing at the Brigham, I think this would be a really good opportunity. There's an opening at where I work at the Beth Israel. And I think you should apply for it. And so I was like, okay, awesome. So I put in everything that I'd done and I sent it off and I got interviewed by Paula Roth at the BI. This was back, I was 24. And I remember showing up to the interview and I was so nervous. And Paula was just she was very warm, but she'd been doing this job a really, really long time, right? Like she knew this job inside and out. And she knew that I didn't really have a ton of direct experience, but that I had transferable skills and that I was coachable and I was excited and I was enthusiastic and I was eager. And I think that's why she hired me, is because she knew that what I didn't know, I was willing to learn and that I would be quick to learn it. Mm-hmm. So she hired me. And my first mentor was Lena Tolis, who now works at Children's and is still...
I see her name on invoices sometimes, and I'm like, oh my God, Lena!
Yeah, I hold her in such a high regard. She taught me all of my great, I like to call it research admin hygiene. All of the skills that I use even to this day, I've held on to them. She was an excellent teacher. But how did I fall into this? Just like a lot of people, I, one, fell into it. And number two, it was totally by accident. But I can't think of a job that I would love more, because for me, I talk about my why a lot, and my why is my mom. And, it's all about hope, right? We work in the business of hope. Research is about giving families and people who are currently being diagnosed with, illnesses that don't have cures or treatments. Maybe 20 years from now, because of the work that we're all doing, that story is going to have a different ending. There's going to be a family 20 years from now that doesn't lose their mom at 52 years old. They're going to be healed and live another 20 years, a whole other life, Like if you think, Minessa, of what we've done in the 20 years since mom died, we've lived a whole other life.
Oh right? My God, Saira, I sometimes think about how many lives I've lived and I'm like, wow, there's the bouncer at the paradise me, there's the living in Oregon me, there's the, there's just so many us's.
Yes, so many versions. And I think that, mom could have lived a whole other life as a grandparent. She could have experienced so many other chapters that she didn't get a chance to. So the reason I kept doing what I was doing, so I think I fell into it because I just needed to shake up my life. I needed to feel something new and exciting, because it was just, I think anybody who's ever lost a parent knows that there's a void that, you can't fill, but I wanted to try anyway. And this is such meaningful work. And it's always interesting. I never show up to work and feel bored. I feel like there's always something to learn. I feel like there's always a place that you can make your efforts count and you can make a difference. So I love this work, and I think I will do it till I die. But anyway, so that's my origin story.
I love it. I think, it's interesting because, my why has changed a lot over the years. Like initially it was, the same reason, research, medical. I myself have had, an interesting story. I like to tell this at my keynotes because it's a good story. When you never know who you're going to impact, right? So I was working on a giant building and my investigators were on one side of the building and I sat across from an investigator who wasn't one of mine, Rami Burstein. And, my migraines were so bad at that time. I was in a really bad relationship. I was in so much agony all the time. And like my office lights dimmed. And so he walks in my office one day. I've never met him. And he says, do you have migraines? And I was just like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
And then I suddenly noticed he said, I'm one of the world's leading researchers on migraine. And I was like, what? And then I look out and I suddenly understood. I've been looking at these paintings for 4 years and it never occurred to me that every single one of these paintings outside his hall were paintings done by his patients when asked to paint what does it look like, what does a migraine feel like. So I looked at it and suddenly I looked at these pictures in a whole new light and every single one of them, Saira, was the same, where one side of the face looks fine and the other side of the face has a stab or like, once you know that it's migraine, suddenly every single one of those images, I was like, how did I not pick this up? Yeah. So he said, listen, I think I can help you. And he did. He and his team, he works in pain management. And so and what's interesting is that I was part of his clinical trials, or a couple of them. And an RA signed off on, the things that I got paid for. And you think about, I'm the research administrator signing off. I did not sign off on my own, just saying someone else did. Compliance.
No violations
no
there.
Compliance. But what's really interesting is that as I have started to, for me, my why has changed as in that I feel like I started doing this job and I started to see how so many different types of people could be good at this job that are typically not. So like I'm chronically ill. I'm a person of color. I have we were caregivers for a while. Like you're a parent, right? So you're a caregiver now, but like I meant caregiver for mom. Right? So there's so many, there's a lot of frameworks that we have, like individual people have, that make working many different types of jobs very difficult, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And what I found with this job is that it's really great for those types of people specifically, because almost always you're going to find a skill set that comes with that group of figuring things out, being good at understanding systems. Like there's a lot of skill sets you develop just being in that role that are really, like you said, transferable. There's a reason that Paula saw that in you, because you have that list of skill sets, right?
Yep.
And so I started to see research administration as like this really great opportunity for joy and like people finding income. Like so over the years, it's changed and evolved why I love this career so much. And I've recommitted to it a couple of times. I think finding community for me early on, was good. So I interviewed, Saira and I worked at the same place for 10 years together. It was great. It was great working. We never really worked together. But I found such a great community of people where I felt so comfortable and so at home. And then taking that further out into some of the national organizations, like NCURA has always been a really deep home for me. And so I feel like what's been great about it for me, aside from, so this is all like esoteric stuff, because like I'm just going to tell you, right? So we're going to talk about that. I love that part of it. But I'm going to actually pull back in a little bit in terms of, I wouldn't have stayed in this job if I didn't love how varied it is. Like I love how I can do so many different things. One minute I'm submitting a grant and I'm looking at guidelines, and then another minute I'm doing a labor cost transfer where I'm focusing on really deep numbers and effort and so on. I like the variety. I like the feature of the job that is you're always juggling a lot of different things. I like that. So it's a feature, not a bug, right?
Yes,
like
I agree.
So I really enjoy that type of environment because I get bored very easily.
Me too.
So I like the challenge that it offers.
Yeah. And I think, for me, exactly what you said, I think that the actual work itself is so interesting because, I made a post yesterday about where research meets forensics. And I always wanted to be...
cool. I have to go read it.
Oh, you didn't read it yet? Yeah, I always think to myself, right, I wanted to be a forensic investigator. I even took classes, because I was really interested in that. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to spend the best years of my life at the worst parts of life, so I'm not going to do that. I did love the mystery part, right? Mom always used to read those murder mysteries. I loved mystery novels growing up. And so for me, I was like, what's great about research is, especially in what we do, which is like, crisis management and cleanup, is that you have an opportunity to find the mystery. You have an opportunity to solve the mystery. You get to do the forensic accounting and really dig in and figure out where did things go wrong and fix them. So it really keeps you engaged and keeps you interested. But I also think that it's ideal for people who have ADHD because for me, like you said, I get bored really easily. So having the opportunity to work in an industry where you're constantly engaged, it's like, oh, here's some pre-award, here's some post-award, here's some crisis management, here's a new hire, here's a visa. Oh, we have a question about compliance. We have an animal question, human question, right? There's so many different things that come up all the time that your brain is always on. You really feel that engagement in the content all the time, which I really appreciate. So I definitely think, I also really appreciate what you said about, being chronically ill and being able to, this job is a good fit for that. Because I think one of the skill sets, like exactly what you said is, having been chronically ill myself, is there's a resilience that you have. Because, when I think about all the days where I had crippling migraines, like I couldn't see and the light bothers you and you still have to find a way to push through. You still have to find a way to get up and work. You figure out whatever those tools are, Tiger Balm or Aleve and bandanas. And you find all these different things that you can use to give yourself.
My Theracane that I put on my, my God, it's like, oh my God, ow, I hit myself in the face. That's going to be good. That's a blooper right there.
But there is a tremendous resilience, but also creative problem solving that comes when you're faced with this and you've dealt with it your whole life, And I really encourage hiring managers to think outside, like when and this is something that you and I are very passionate about, is tapping into those workforces that maybe weren't looked at before COVID because remote work was not something that people really looked at as, feasible. But now we've proven out that it is. And that people can work in a remote environment. And so I think that creates the opportunity for people who might be struggling with chronic illness to step into this kind of work because they have those transferable skills and they have that resilience and commitment. So I think that, COVID happened and now it's opened this door where I think there's opportunities for individuals who may not have seen this as a good fit to kind of now step into it with those transferable skills.
Here, we're gonna come back to all y'all. So now I'm on a different camera because while Saira was saying her very important and brilliant thing, my camera froze and I'm like, or something. And Saira's like, she goes, I need to take a picture. I'm like, yeah, no, go fuck off. That's not happening. What did you say? It was so great though.
You did not take a picture.
I know, right?
You did not give me. I don't even know. We'll just cut it out.
But here's what I'm thinking, right? What I would really love, though, is to hear other people's origin stories. Because I think, so here's the thing. So Katie, one of the things that is really funny about this job is that almost everybody falls into it. However, I did a training this one time on one of my keynotes or something. I can't remember which one it was. Oh, I remember. It was at my UVM keynote. I totally remember. So first I was at NCURA. Okay, so I'm at NCURA, and I'm talking to this person. And I said, so how did you get into research administration? And I wish I had gotten this person's name. And he said, my mother was a research administrator, and so I'm a research administrator. And I said, you are the first son of research administration. Like, oh my God. So I told this story at UVM, and two people in the audience raised their hand and said, I'm a mom and I'm the daughter. And they both had come into research administration as well. And so we're like, oh my God, like we're starting our line.
That's amazing. I actually even told Eliza, because when we were talking about what kind of job she wants to do, I was like, you should do what I do. I'm like, I could teach you how to be a research administrator. It would be so fun.
Oh my God, that's the best story ever, to say that I've created a line of research administrators. Like, yes, let's do that. So share your origin story.